So, good evening, everyone. I am Yash Rathi, and I welcome you all to the 32nd Learners Forum of ISTD Ahmedabad chapter. Just a brief introduction about ISTD and today's topic. The ISTD was established in April 1970. It is a national level professional and non-profit society registered under the Societies Registrations Act 1860. The society is affiliated to the International Federation of Training and Development Organizations USA and Asian Regional Training and Development Organizations Manila. ISTD is managed by a national council headed by a president at the apex level and managing committees headed by a chairperson at the chapter level. They are assisted by other office bearers and functional committees in the wide spectrum of activities. ISTD organizes training programs all over the country at chapter and national levels. Today we have with us Ms. Gunjan Agarwal. She is the HR Business Advisor at Ford India Private Limited. She has over 8 years of experience and has subject matter expertise in people cycle plan activities and various compliances. She is also a member of Internal Complaints Committee formed under the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act at Ford India Private Limited. So Ms. Gunjan will be taking us through the overview of Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act, which is also known as POSH Act. This act propelled India to select League of Nations that has outlawed workplace sexual harassment through national legislation. This act, along with the rules, which is collectively called the POSH Law, aims to foster a safe and secure environment for women by preventing, prohibiting, and redressing instances of sexual harassment at workplaces in India. So without much delay, I now request Gunjan to kindly take us through the overview of the Act.
Thank you so much, Yash. Good evening, everybody. So as Yash said already that today's topic is on the POSH Act, which is called as the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act of 2013. So I intend to cover the content that I have today to present before you all in close to about 50-55 minutes. And as we know that acts are usually dry, we'll try and make the session a little interactive. I would open the forum for questions sometime so that I get to hear your opinion also on what is on your mind regarding certain things which are prominent when it comes to this act. So let's get started quickly on the outline of this workshop. So we talk about introduction, background and overview of the POSH Act. Then we talk about the legal framework. We talk about the internal complaints committee that is to be formed under this act, about the constitution, roles and responsibility, procedure to conduct an inquiry. We'll talk about a few cases pertaining to this act, and then we'll open the forum for questions. So Yash was telling me that there's a functionality in AirMeet wherein there is a question stamp. You can keep posting the questions and probably we can take them towards the end of the session. Okay, so with this, let's move on to the next slide. So this is basically the foundation of the act. So if you look at POSH Act, it is based on two pillars. The first is the Constitution of India, Articles 14, 15 and 21. And the next is the case of Vishakha versus the state of Rajasthan. So if we look at Article 14, 15 and 21, Article 14 is basically right to equality and equal protection of law. Article 15 is a prohibition regarding discrimination on grounds of religion, race, caste, sex or place of birth. 15 subsection 3 is about making special laws against protection of for protection of women and children, and Article 21 is about protection of life and personal liberty of a person. So these are the bases on which the POSH Act is based. upon. And thereafter, eventually, it was the Vishakha guidelines which took the shape of the legislation which we call as POSH. So, if I could take a minute to share about how Vishakha guidelines came into being. So this date backs to 1992, wherein there was this social activist by the name of Bhavri Devi, who was very active in the state of Rajasthan. In fact, she was working with the state government of Rajasthan to work towards causes of women and children. And it was that point in time when she was working to stop child marriage, the practice of child marriage in Rajasthan, which did not go well with the locals there, and she was brutally raped by a couple of men. So it was during this time also that you would remember that our economy had opened up, and it was the era of liberalization, globalization, privatization, and we could see more women out there on the field compared to any time before 1991. So it was clearly visible that there was a void in terms of a concrete legislation to protect women who were out there to earn bread and butter for their families. So after this incident, there was a group of women activists who got together under the banner of Vishakha. They were a group of activists. There were also a couple of lawyers who got together, and they filed a PIL, public interest litigation, in the Supreme Court, and they demanded justice for Vishakha. And somewhere in 1997, the judgment came from Supreme Court, and the Vishakha guidelines were brought into being. And at that point in time, the Honorable Supreme Court also ordered that these guidelines were the basis to start with, and it ordered that the state should also form a complete legislation to protect the right of working women. And that's where in 2013, the POSH Act came into being. So this is about the genesis of the Act. So moving ahead, I have already spoken about this. So moving ahead, we shall talk about the salient features of POSH. So the objective of POSH is to prohibit, prevent, and redress acts of sexual harassment, and to provide safe working environment to women. So prohibition is something that is a strict no-no by the policy of a certain state, something that is not allowed at all. And prevention is more to do with educating people so that they come to that side of their behavior where they refrain from doing certain things. And redressal, of course, if there's something that has happened, then appropriate measures need to be taken to redress the grievance. So POSH is applicable to the organized sector as well as the unorganized sector. Definition of workplace is wide and also includes places visited by employees during the course of employment. So this would also include, say for example, if a salesperson from an automobile company is visiting at the dealer's end, then probably the dealer premise would also get covered under the purview of this act. And also the commutation that she is taking, if something happens while commuting in the company provided transportation, that also would be covered under the ambit of the act. So POSH provides for constitution of Internal Complaints Committee, that is also known as ICC, which is an internal robust mechanism for addressing complaints of sexual harassment in workplace. We shall talk in detail about what ICC is. POSH provides for constitution of Local Complaints Committee to receive complaints of sexual harassment from establishment not having an ICC. Well, I shall also talk about the circumstances under which the ICC need not to be formed. So when there is no ICC within the organization, then the aggrieved women employee can switch to LCC, which is a Local Complaints Committee, which has to be formed by the district officer to tackle the case of sexual harassment. So these are some of the salient features. Okay, so I will take a pause here, and I would request you all to share your views about what do you think is sexual harassment. So very quickly, one or two views. Maybe you can resort to chatting, and maybe Yash can support me with reading out your comments if that is easier than sort of unmuting yourself and coming online. So I pause here for 30 seconds, and I would want to hear from you on what are your views around what is sexual harassment.
So, team, if you want, you can click on raise hand option and you can come up live and share your views around what Gunjan had asked. Like, what are your views around what is sexual harassment? So you can probably raise your hand and share your views. Or you can type it out in the chat box. Okay, so Dr. Samir Pingle says, misbehavior with other gender and sensuality. Yogesh sir says, any unwanted and unwelcomed advances towards female employees. Absolutely. And we have Manish sir as well. He wants to share something, so I'll hand over the mic to him.
Sure.
Over to you, Manish ji.
Hi, good evening. Yash, hi, and good evening, Gunjan.
Hi, good evening, sir.
Good evening. To me, sexual harassment could be an indirect way as well, wherein when the female colleagues are being harassed by not giving them adequate respect of work, maybe assigning them, or maybe taking their opinion during the discussions when they are part of the team, or it could be, passing a comments or something on the meeting, gender specific comments or maybe person specific comments. Is that what is right as far as my understanding is concerned?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I would say your thoughts are very progressive and very interesting to hear that, not giving them equal say when it comes to work also should amount to harassment. Yeah.
Wow.
Very progressive, Mr. Manish.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think all the inputs are quite. Do we have some more inputs?
Yes, Gunjan.
Yes, please.
Dr. Samir would like to share.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I just wanted to check when we talk about sexual harassment, I think it is for both the genders. It is not just women who are harassed, but means what is the legal stand on this? I would like to know.
Sure, Dr. Samir. Well, I completely agree with you when you say that harassment could be to any gender. So it is not gender specific. But I would say it's unfortunate, or I would say probably the act is in its nascent stages. That at this point in time, if you look at this act, the POSH Act of 2013, it covers sexual harassment only against women employees. However, I wholeheartedly believe that there have to be some changes in the act to include both the genders, and definitely at any point in time sexual harassment is not gender specific. It could be to either gender and from either side. So I completely agree with what you're saying.
Right. Thank you.
Sure, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. We have Mr. Yogesh Chati who would want to share his opinion.
Sure.
Okay, so he has put up in the chat window. So he has said that this is something that ILO has included. So something that probably the Indian Act can also pick up. So thank you so much, Yogesh sir, for adding that input.
Thank you so much, Yogesh sir, for your input. So Yash, with your approval, may I move ahead?
Sure, Gunjan. Yes.
All right. Okay. So with all the comments and all the inputs which has been given by our distinguished participants, let's see what does the Act say about sexual harassment. So sexual harassment includes any one or more of the following unwelcome acts or behavior. So physical contact and advances would amount to sexual harassment. A demand or request for sexual favor would amount to sexual harassment. Making sexually colored remarks, showing pornography, or any other unwelcome physical, verbal, or non-verbal conduct of sexual nature. So this is the broad umbrella that has been defined under the POSH Act, and any of the acts which could be built into these umbrellas amount to acts of sexual harassment, and a women employee has the rights to file a written complaint if she has faced any of this in her workplace. So moving to the next slide. I had a video here, but then our system is not supporting the video. So maybe I will move on to the next slide to discuss in detail about what amounts to sexual harassment. So types of sexual harassment. So quid pro quo. So example is your chance of winning your sexual harassment case would be greatly improved if you have dinner with me afterwards. So quid pro quo is nothing but this for that. So here there's one example, probably I'll quote another example, which is very famous, So there are times when, for a promotion or a career advancement, we've heard that, complaints are made by women employees saying that they are offered promotions and career advancements and further career opportunities in lieu of something, which is demanded by the opposite gender, and that is nothing but this for that. Hostile working environment. Example, hostile working environment sexual harassment is created when unwelcome harassment is severe or pervasive enough to alter the conditions of an individual's employment or creates an abusive, intimidating, hostile or offensive working environment. So, for example, talking indirectly about a woman's body or talking indirectly about a woman's sense of dressing, which makes it very difficult to carry herself to work every day. There's nothing direct, but then the women employee in question is the person who's able to best judge that, these comments are passed towards her and it affects her mentally. So that also would tantamount to sexual harassment under hostile working environment. So implied or explicit promise of preferential treatment in employment. So it could be in any way, probably giving more projects or moving to a team of the employee's choice. So, and demanding a favor in return, that would amount to sexual harassment. Or implied or explicit threat of detrimental treatment in employment. If you don't do this, you see what I do to you. Something of that sort. That also amounts to sexual harassment. Explicit or implied threat about present or future employment status. So, for example, we know that we have employees on contractual basis. We have employees who are trainees, and I have dealt with one such case wherein there was this trainee employee, and the supervisor was saying that now you are due for confirmation, so you have to come and attend such and such party, otherwise your chances of confirmation are going to get feeble. So these cases are explicit cases of sexual harassment. Interference with work or creating an intimidating hostile environment, which I already spoke about in the last slide. Humiliating treatment likely to affect health or safety. Sometimes, in fact, later probably we'll also talk about this. So the Act says that when we are also paying compensation to the women employee as a punishment to the respondent, at that point in time, we also take into account the loss to the women employee for the medical expenses. We also try to see the loss to the women employee in terms of the mental trauma that she has gone through, because these cases are beyond physical trauma. They are more than physical. I would say they are mental trauma to the women employees, and sometimes it affects detrimentally the health of the employee in question from a mental state perspective as well. Okay, so with this, I have another question for the participants. So, is it mandatory for an organization to have an anti-harassment policy? And when I say mandatory, I'm talking from the perspective of POSH Act.
So Yogesh sir says yes.
Okay.
This particular question.
Okay, well, if we have no other answers.
Manishi also says yes.
Okay, okay. Do we have any other answers?
No, as of now, that's about it, Kunjay.
I think both are correct. Yes, under the POSH Act, it is mandatory for an organization to have an anti-harassment policy. And when the organization has an anti-harassment policy, when we are dealing with any case that has been registered under the POSH Act, both the policy as well as the act have to be read together. So that is a point which is essential. Okay. So when it comes to the POSH Act, let's look at what are the employer's obligations. So first, providing a safe working environment. So as we saw in the very first title slide itself, the title slide says it is prohibition. So in order to prohibit cases of sexual harassment in the workplace, so it's very important that the organization fosters a safe working environment. It could be by view of telling people that this could lead to loss of employment. It could be by virtue of training them, shift in their behavior in whatever way the organization feels appropriate. But it's important that the organization makes all possible attempts to provide a safe working environment. Display at the workplace details of penal consequences, composition of ICC and grievance redressal mechanism. So display at the workplace details of penal consequences. So this would be nothing but the anti-harassment policy of the organization. Composition of ICC. The formation of the internal complaints committee is imperative for any organization. So the organizations have to also put the composition of the ICC at all conspicuous places, and the grievance redressal mechanism, so that all the employees are aware of what is a mechanism, what is a way to take if they land up into any unfortunate incident like this. Organize workshops and awareness programs for sensitizing employees, so very, very important. And also organizing orientation programs for the members of ICC. So here what happens is, see, I was looking at a couple of high court judgments. So even the high court, various high courts have said that until and unless there is something which is disproportionately appropriate in terms of how the inquiry was conducted or whether the principles of natural justice were followed, even the high court said that they do not want to interfere with the judgment that has been given by the internal complaints committee. And the act also says that the ICC has the powers of that of a civil court. So when such amount of power is invested in the ICC, it's very important for the employer or any employer to invest in the members of ICC so that they are well equipped to handle the cases of sexual harassment. Next is provide assistance to aggrieved employee if she chooses to file a police complaint. So while we have ICC, but then still having ICC does not discourage a women employee to take the path of going through a police complaint. So, and if she decides to file a police complaint, it is essential that the organization supports her to file a police complaint. Cooperate and assist during the course of the inquiry. So if a police complaint is filed, then it is important that the organization supports and cooperates during the course of the inquiry. Let's move on to the next slide. So what is internal complaints committee? So internal complaints committee is nothing but it is a grievance redressal forum which has been mandated under this act, which means any organization having 10 or more employees, and it does not specify whether it is female employees or male employees. Any organization having 10 or more employees have to have ICC in place, and so every employer has an obligation to constitute an ICC, and it is constituted by an employer through a written order, and separate ICC has to be constituted where workplace located at different places. So for example, I will give you an example. So now we have various automobile companies and various IT companies, in fact IT, yes, banking for that matter, who have branches all over India. And in fact, say for example, if we take Ahmedabad, so in Ahmedabad itself they may have 2 to 3 offices. So the act says that at every office, if you have 10 or more employees, you need to form a separate ICC. So that is what is mentioned in the act. Okay. So now let's look at what should be the constitution of ICC. So the act says that there should be at least 4 members in the ICC. So one would be the presiding officer, who shall be a women employee and who is employed at a senior level at the workplace. So the act and the rules are silent about the senior level. So here when they say senior level, it is about, in the organization. So somebody who has the most amount of experience, we would say, is a senior level employee, because the act has not specified what senior level means. Apart from that, we will have 2 members from amongst employees who are preferably committed to the cause of women, and it doesn't specify which gender. It could be male, it could be female, but then we need to have people who are dedicated to the cause of women and who have legal knowledge, or the organization needs to invest in so much that the person is legally equipped to handle cases of sexual harassment, and who also has knowledge of the POSH Act. And very important, one member from amongst the NGO or associations who are committed to the cause of women and who are familiar to the issues relating to sexual harassment. So this way they have said 4. And also again there are judgments also, and in fact it is mentioned in the rules also, that whenever an inquiry is happening, so if we have at least 3 members from the ICC, we can go ahead. But then it says that they definitely the presiding officer and the NGO has to be there. Apart from that, if there is one more member, we can go ahead and hold the inquiry, which means it is not essential that all the members of the ICC need to be there, need to sit in the inquiry. Okay. So conditions for constitution of ICC. So key points. So first point is what I've already spoken. If offices or administrative units of the workplace are located at different places, then ICC to be constituted at all offices. If senior level women employee is not available, the presiding officer to be nominated from other offices of the workplace, and if not in other offices as well, then the presiding officer to be nominated from other workplace of the same employer or the other department. So here I'll give you an example. For example, if say for example an automobile company has a unit in Sanand, okay, but then it doesn't have a woman employee who we can nominate as a presiding officer, then the unit here can consider having somebody from some other manufacturing unit. And if suppose for example in some other manufacturing unit also you do not have a senior women employee, you can go to the corporate office also. That is what it is saying, that in absence of a senior level women employee at a said unit, you can also go to the other offices. And what it also says is when it comes to ICC, at least 1/2 of the ICC members should be women, which means out of the 4, at least 2 people have to be women. So one presiding officer is definitely a woman. So out of the 3, you need to have at least 1 woman. Could be from the NGO or 2 other people who we have to nominate as part of ICC. ICC members to hold office for a period of 3 years from the date of nomination. So after every 3 years, the ICC members have to get rotated. The members appointed from amongst the NGO or organizations have to be paid fees or allowance for holding the proceedings of the ICC. So they have to be paid fees. The fees is very, very nominal, apparently, some 250 rupees. And the Act also says that the traveling allowance has to be given. But we know that practically when we go ahead and we onboard an NGO, no NGO will come and work with us for such a nominal fees. But again, that is what is mentioned in the Act. We can always go ahead and do over and above what the Act says. So this is for the constitution of ICC. Okay. So now removal of members of ICC. So we have seen that one thing is for sure that after completion of 3 years, the ICC committee has to be refreshed. So that is one. Apart from that, what are the other conditions when even before the completion of 3 years, the members of ICC can be removed? Violated the confidentiality of complaint and inquiry proceedings by publishing the same. So some people have this habit of going around and talking, about, okay, such and such case has come, this has happened, that has happened, but that is not allowed when it comes to being a member of ICC. You have to keep it highly confidential. Convicted for an offense or an inquiry under any law pending. So if the member himself or herself has been complained about, in which case the said person cannot be a part of ICC. Guilty in any disciplinary proceeding. So either convicted or guilty, both ways the person has to give up the office of being an ICC member. Abused his position as to render his continuance in office prejudicial to public interest. So if he has abused his position in any way, probably doing a favor to one of the respondents in lieu of maybe money or something else, in which case also if it is brought to light, the ICC member has to be removed. So moving to the next slide, just a second. Okay, so now let's come to conciliation. So before initiating inquiry at the request of the complainant, ICC to take steps to settle the matter through conciliation. See, again, usually conciliation comes into play only when it is a case of misunderstanding, more than, a real case of sexual harassment. So sometimes if it is a case of misunderstanding, then probably the ICC committee can get into a conciliation mode and sort out the matter. But one thing is to be noted that the conciliation cannot be a monetary settlement. And once the settlement is done, it has to be recorded by the ICC. Copy of the settlement has to be forwarded to the employer to take action as specified in recommendations. So it will recommend
Gunjan, your voice is breaking and you're not audible as of now. Meanwhile, Gunjan is setting up her audio again. She got disconnected. So the question on the slide was, is it mandatory to have the complaint in written form, which needs to be submitted to the Internal Complaints Committee? So you can probably share your responses in the chat box. Okay, so Manishi says yes, it is required. Samir sir says yes, it is mandatory. Yogesh sir says it's better if you do that. So sir, I would like to hear from you. It's better if you do that. So can the complaint be given in the oral form as well? Would you like to raise your hand and share your inputs around it? So Dr. Chugan says, I think both are needed. Manishi says yes. Okay. So probably I'll invite Yogesh sir to share his views how this would work in both written and the oral format. Yes, Samir sir.
I have another point, not this one. I just want to know whether bullying, targeting an employee also comes under this law or not.
Okay. So probably once Kunjan is able to hear us again, so we can put up this question. This is a very valid question. And probably if someone from our panel is aware of this, they can take up this question. I think we have a lawyer on the panel as well. Okay, so Yogesh sir wants to speak. So Samir sir, I'll
Yeah,
give
please.
the audio to Yogesh
Yes,
sir.
yes. Yeah.
Yogesh sir, I'll invite you to the stage and then you can accept that invite and you can go ahead. So, sir, I've sent you the invitation. Yeah. Yogesh sir, we can hear you.
Yeah, yes, I think it is not mandatory that it should be in written complaint, because if that lady is illiterate or suppose not in a position to write a complaint, and she can definitely submit her, not we can say submit, but she can orally give a complaint to the ICC, and they can note it down. So it is not mandatory that it should be written every time.
Okay, okay, sir.
Suppose she's working
Yes.
in a unorganized sector, or suppose she's unskilled worker in an industry, so she may not be in a position to give a written application. So in that case, we can say verbally also complaint can be accepted.
Okay, sir. Sir, so in that case, how is it validated that this is the complaint that was submitted on so and so time by so and so person?
That we have to ask the expert, but I am not expert on that. But we can just say that if the person is illiterate, so it is you can't say that you are not illiterate, because that is how your complaint will not be entertained here. So
Mhm.
this is the logic which I am thinking that it will work here also, and I'm not sure, but we'll ask the expert what in such scenario what they are supposed to do.
Sure, sure, sir. Also, sir, Samir sir had a question. Probably, if you can answer that, whether bullying and targeting can be considered as harassment.
No, in sexual harassment, it is very specifically mentioned any unwanted and unwelcome behavior. Bullying and harassment can be a mental harassment. So, mental harassment is totally different thing. Sexual harassment is, I think, we should not mix sexual harassment with mental harassment, or mental harassment with sexual harassment.
Okay, okay, sir. So, sir, just another question that I had on this area. So, say for example, if there is mental harassment, so whether that would go under the ID Act or the Standing Orders Act, where there are some clauses which are mentioned about how the grievance is redressed.
Yeah, obviously, if you have a works committee, or if you have a joint management council where this grievance redressal procedure can be heard, so in that case, that mental harassment issue can be raised.
Okay, okay, sir. Sir, like this is the last question around it. So, for example, if there is a misunderstanding, say for example, the woman employee feels that she is being sexually harassed, but the intent of that particular person is not the same. So, in that kind of a scenario, as Ms. Gunjan mentioned, there's a conciliation that happens.
Hmm.
So, if it is decided that this was not a case of sexual harassment, so would that move to the grievance redressal committee?
No, if it is clear that it is a misunderstanding, and as told by Gunjan ma'am, that it is, then they go for conciliation, and that misunderstanding has to be removed. But that person, the angry person, it should be seen in the eyes of that angry person that yes, it was a misunderstanding, and now it is clear now. And then written copy has to be what she told. The settlement copy has to be given to the management, and okay, now she is happy that it was a misunderstanding, and it is not a sexual harassment.
Okay,
Normally,
okay, sir.
what happened here is whenever we see a lot of cases. One of my friend was working with ACC Cement in Mumbai. She had referred me one case, and where a senior HR person was means his behavior towards one female HR colleague was means totally after a long maternity leave, it changed, and then a lot of mental harassment plus physical and you can say sexual harassment also started. So in that case, they were confused what to do, how to do, and he's a senior HR person. Whether we should go to approach ICC or we should report this matter to MD. But after a lot of we can say consultation, they approached the sexual harassment committee, and then it was referred, and the management took it very seriously. And that senior HR person was warned, and then he was transferred to some other you can say corporate in the same company. So this is how I think anything which is related to sexual harassment should not be taken it very lightly. It has to be taken, and the management commitment should be there, and you should be very much serious about any complaint, whether it's from HR or any other person, whether it's a senior person also. You should take it very seriously, and then only then the message will go, and everybody will be I think we can say the discipline and all these things will be maintained in any industry. I think our speaker is online now. She can proceed further.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Yash,
Yes, sir.
for holding the phone. Well, today is a day of many technical glitches. Anyways, I was just listening to Mr. Chati, and he was explaining about this incident of a woman landing in a lot of discrimination at workplace after maternity leave, and the matter was taken to ICC. So thank you.
There was one more question that had come up. So, for
Yeah.
example, if around this particular question that you have put up on the screen, so for
Yeah.
example, if a woman is not well read and she submits a complaint, so how is that complaint recorded in the official proceedings?
Okay, so Yash, what the act says is that that on her behalf, her friends, her colleagues, they can support her to file a complaint. And if she's not educated, what can be done is the complaint can be read to her, and then she can put some impression. But then under this act, it is mandatory that you file a written complaint. So it can be filed by a colleague, a friend, a relative, anybody.
Okay.
But ma'am, in that case, if suppose that lady is misguided, means I have seen one case in division office of Rajkot and the Indian Railways, where was a sweeper was misguided by some other trade union leaders, and they had accused a station master. And then the inquiry was there conducted, and it was found that it was a false complaint, and ultimately that lady was removed. So means I don't know. I'm not expert in this, but is it means mandatory that if she is illiterate, then any person can?
Sorry, your voice is getting cut. Hello.
Yeah, ma'am. Should I repeat it?
Yeah, no, I heard that you said that there was a sweeper who frivolously complained about a station master, and later on the committee discovered that it was a frivolous complaint.
She was misguided. Yes, yeah. It was a false complaint. Yeah.
Absolutely. So in this case, one is that certain things are case-to-case basis. So, for example, now if you're talking about this sweeper in question, so she was misguided. But again, when the act is formulated, it is formulated with the view that anybody who is filing a complaint is an adult working in the organization, and therefore against frivolous complaints also the act has again given written what should be done if the person or the women employee in question is found to have filed a false complaint. So they have the act mentions that there has to be strict action against her in accordance with the service rules, and if there are no service rules, the act has written what and all can be done, and the punishment can go to the tune of removing her from the job. So, so it's very important that so again, what you are talking about is from the railway and all, where such kind of setup is not possible. But for private companies, for PSU, for government organizations also, which are situated in one definite premises, therefore the act says that you have to put in all conspicuous places what are the consequences of sexual harassment or an anti-harassment policy, and there we also need to include what will be the consequences of a frivolous complaint, just to make people aware. And after that also, if people land up doing that, then definitely whatever would have happened to the respondent if the complaint was true, the same thing will happen to the complainant if the complaint is frivolous and untrue for wasting the time of the ICC and the resources of the company. Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you. Thanks for the update. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. So now with this, we will move to the procedure to conduct inquiry. So, okay. So this will include what is the process and what are the timelines. So before getting into this, so the limitation for filing a complaint under POSH Act is 3 months. So they say that from whenever the incident has happened, from that day within 3 months, the complaint has to be filed. And the Act also says that if it is a series of incidents, then whenever the last incident happened, from that day up to 3 months, the complaint can be filed with the ICC committee. So now, what happens if the woman is not able to file a complaint due to legitimate reasons, or because she was unwell physically, mentally, because of the trauma that she had to go into? So on case-to-case basis, the Act says that the ICC can give an extension of up to 3 months on case-to-case basis, looking at how true the verbatim given by the victim is. So based on which the extension can be given up to 3 months to file 6 months. So now let's get into the process of conducting the inquiry. So this inquiry also has to be completed in the same way as we do the domestic inquiries. Principles of natural justice has to be followed. So these are the two mandatory things which we have to keep in mind when we do an inquiry as ICC members. So written complaint, as I said, is a must. It should be filed in 6 copies along with supporting documents and name and addresses of the witnesses. So if there are any witnesses, names and address, they have to be filed within 3 months of the incident, and time extendable by another 3 months, as I told you. Upon receipt of the complaint, so as ICC, once a complaint is received, 1 copy of the complaint will be given to the respondent. So within 7 days. So for example, on 1st of February, if you have received the complaint as ICC member, by 7th, we need to ensure that 1 copy of the complaint is given to the to the respondent, so that he can file his reply to the complaint. And that reply has to be filed within 10 days. The inquiry has to be completed within 90 days from the receipt of the complaint. So which means on 1st February, if the ICC team has received the complaint, then the complaint has to be has to be looked into, and inquiry has to be completed within 90 days, which means February, March and April. By end of April, the inquiry should be over. And thereafter, within 10 days, the inquiry report has to be prepared and submitted to the management. So here, one thing that you have to note is that ICC committee and management are 2 separate entities. So ICC is going to prepare a report, give its recommendation to the management. Management has 60 days time to look into the report prepared by ICC and to act appropriately. And after the award has been served by the management, the respondent against whom the award has been served has a time of 90 days to file an appeal against the decision of the committee. So that's how we go into the process of inquiry. So now here there is a flow diagram as well. I spent a couple of minutes on this also. So incident of sexual harassment at workplace, either ICC or LCC would be notified. So the first step is to look if conciliation is possible. And as I said, conciliation is mostly possible only in case of misunderstanding. If there is a tangible harassment that has happened, there is no scope for conciliation. You move to the next step, which is getting into the domestic inquiry. So when you prepare a report for inquiry, if there is a misconduct, just a second, yeah. So if there is a action for misconduct that has to happen, or no action is required by the employer, or if during the inquiry it is established that the complaint was a malicious or a false complaint, in either case the inquiry report has to be prepared, submitted to the management. And within 90 days, if the respondent is not satisfied with the award that has been given, he or she can go and appeal to the court or tribunal. So
Will
that
you be able to see that particular flow diagram?
Oh, it's on the right hand side of the I was going through in terms of procedure to conduct inquiry.
No,
It's on the
we are
same
not
slide.
able to see. Probably you can just sum up the forthcoming slides. I think the screen is not able to move ahead. So maybe sum up the slides. Yeah. Yeah, we are able to see it now. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I've gone out of presentation mode. Okay. Sure. So let's move on to the next slide. So how do you prepare an inquiry report? I'm sure that many of you would be aware, but still it's worthwhile spending a few minutes here. So, as already spoken, within 10 days of the completion of the inquiry, we have to, or the ICC has to prepare the inquiry report. Report has to be made available to the concerned parties. So, concerned parties here are three. One is the complainant, one is the respondent, and the third is management. Where the allegation has not been proved, ICC to recommend that no action is required to be taken in the matter. So it has to write clearly in the inquiry report. Where allegation has been proved, ICC to recommend action for misconduct in accordance with service rules or what we call as the certified standing order, or else ask for written apology, warning, reprimand or censure, withhold promotion. So these are the various type of punishments that can be given: withhold increment, terminate, undergo counseling session, or carry out a community service program for behavioral change, or to deduct from salary any sum as it may consider appropriate to be paid to complainant or to her legal heirs. So how do you calculate the sum? The calculation of sum could be in terms of the expenses, the medical expenses that she has to incur, or if she could not continue with her job because of the mental trauma, the loss, the monetary loss in terms of, in terms of the salary that she had to forego because she could not continue with the job, or she had to take sick leaves over and above the stipulated number of sick leaves. So these are the things, or say a financial estimate of the mental trauma that she had to go through. So these are certain things that can be kept in mind when the sum is being suggested by the ICC members. Okay. So now this brings us to the next question. What if an employee of X organization is accused of sexual harassment by a female employee of Y organization? So in this case, what would happen? So there is a male member, male employee from X organization, and there is a female member of Y organization. Now this female member from the Y organization says that I have been sexually harassed by this male member from the X organization. Then what do you think? Which organization has to take things ahead, where the complaint would be filed? So I would request your views on this.
So Yogesh sir says X organization. Samir sir says organization X. Yeah.
Okay. So here what will happen is, thank you so much for your input. So here what will happen is, now this female is of Y organization, right? So this female employee is going to go to her organization, and of course she would have gone to this X organization because of some office work. So she will go to her organization, which is Y organization. She will go to the ICC committee. She is going to file a written complaint that while I was deputed to X organization on such and such date for such and such duty, I was sexually harassed. So she has to go and file a complaint in her organization. Now what X organization has to do is that X organization has to extend full support to complete the inquiry to Y organization. So this is how it is going to turn out. Again, it is a very rare possibility, but since it is a little bit of a, knowledge testing question, I thought of putting it here. So usually what happens is, whichever organization the female employee belongs to, she will go to her organization and file a complaint. And thereafter the ICC committee there has to take things ahead with the dealer or the showroom or the other organization. Wherever she was sexually harassed, she has to notify them. They have to tell that, okay, such and such employee has been accused, and as per the act, the said entity has to fully cooperate in terms of sending the person for inquiry or whatever that may be required. Okay, so with this, maybe we'll move to the next slide. So what are the powers of ICC? So towards the beginning of the presentation, we had said that ICC has the same powers to conduct the inquiry as the civil court under Civil Procedure Code with respect to, so ICC can summon or enforce attendance of any person and examine the person under oath. So the ICC can give letter to any person to be present for inquiry on such and such date. So that is point number one. The ICC can request or can command the discovery or production of documents which may support in the case of sexual harassment. And it can it can grant interim relief to the aggrieved women during the pendency of the proceedings. So see here, what happens is, suppose a women employee has filed a complaint against a supervisor saying that she is sexually harassed. Now imagine a scenario where you have so much time. The ICC committee is going to take 90 days. Thereafter, preparation of report that takes another 10 days, and then it is going to submit a recommendation to the management. Management would take another 60 days, so 160 days. So the case can worsen to any limits during this time. Therefore, the ICC has the power to grant interim relief to the aggrieved women employee. So interim relief could be transferring her to some other workplace or granting her leave. So those kind of measures the ICC can take. So see, we have also mentioned what are the interim relief measures that can be taken. So one is to transfer her to or the respondent. Either ways, you transfer the aggrieved women employee to provide leave for 3 months, in addition to the leave that she is already entitled to restrain the respondent from reporting on her work performance or writing her confidential report. So it's very important. I am reporting to Mr. X. Mr. X has been sexually harassing me and I complain against him. So obviously then that person is not going to write a good annual performance report for me. So in which case it is a moral duty of the organization to ensure that this supervisor does not write the performance report of this employee. So why is interim relief important? As I said, that there is a lot of time in between filing the complaint and reaching to the end of the inquiry. So it's very important that interim relief is given to the women employee so that it doesn't become a case of ongoing sexual harassment. So what is the procedure to conduct the inquiry? You have the ICC committee has to follow the same procedure that is being followed for any domestic inquiry, and the principles of natural justice have to be followed, which means that no party should be punished unheard. All the parties should be given appropriate opportunity to cross-examine the other party, the witnesses of the other party. Very, very important. And once information and review is complete, it is important that a reasoned finding, which is the inquiry report, is made. Comment on underlying factors that may have contributed to the incident. So it is always suggested that in cases of sexual harassment, when you write the inquiry report, it could be written in a chronological order so that it makes more sense and the reasoning is accurate. Create a timeline to help establish the sequence of events related to the complaint. Compare similarities and differences within each of the statements made by the parties. So when we listen to the witnesses, what creates a difference is that is there any connecting the dot happening when we listen to the witnesses. So all those nitty-gritties also have to be spelled out in the report very explicitly, because that has to be given to the management and it will be made. So it has to be a very, very comprehensive report. In the report, describe the process followed. So it's very important that you define the sequence of events. For example, on such and such date, the complaint was received. Then on such and such date, the respondent was examined. On such and such date, the statement of the complainant was taken. On such and such date, the cross-examination of the complainant happened. The cross-examination of the witnesses of the complainant happened. Everything. What were the submissions that were placed during the inquiry? Any all the letters, all the other paperwork that is there. That also has to be put on the table and it has to be taken on record. So all those things have to be followed, so that it is like a detailed report, and it also exclusively spells out that all the process which has been defined under the law has been taken care of. So these papers are also called as exhibits. So the names of all the exhibits have to be written in the inquiry report. So and very, very important, while you're doing all this, it's important that the confidentiality of the matter is intact. So all right. So these are some of my views before we get into important cases regarding the Act. So one very important, and this question was also brought up in the very beginning of the session, that gender equality. So here the Act, again, we would all give the Act the benefit of doubt that it is in its nascent stages, and it can definitely, there can definitely be an amendment to this Act. But at this point in time, it covers only women employees, and definitely, as I said at that point in time also, and we all believe that sexual harassment is not gender specific. It can happen to either of the genders. So that I believe is a loophole in this law. And if no educated women is there in the organization, then who shall be the presiding officer of the ICC generally in an unorganized sector? So for organized sector, we have said that you can go to other offices, other entities, and you can have a presiding officer. But in case of an unorganized sector, what happens? So that is a question which remains open. Of course, we have SHE-Box, we have the local complaints committee, but wherein there are 10 or more members, in which case what happens? That is a question that remains unanswered. Constitution of the ICC, where the organization has more than 10 employees but no women employee, or only one women employee. So if there is only one women employee, how do we constitute the ICC? In this case, we have to resort to the appropriate authority to seek guidance, but then the law is absolutely silent about it. So, and then again, the fourth point is something that we have discussed during our workshop, which is what is the definition of senior? When we say the presiding officer has to be a senior level women employee, so the definition of senior is not clear. See, moreover, I read certain case laws which said that there was a complaint. So what happened? So there was this presiding officer, and there was the complainant. So now this complainant was senior to the presiding officer. So then the High Court concluded that the term senior is not a relative term. So it is not that if the complaint has been filed by a even more senior employee, or the complaint is against an even more senior employee, then you need to keep shuffling the presiding officer. That is not the case. But then if the definition of senior was more clear, probably such cases would not arise at all. And again, if you would have seen that we spoke so much about how the inquiry has to be conducted and the expenses in terms of training and educating the ICC members and all of that. So when we talk about large-scale industries, it looks feasible still. But then when we talk about medium-scale industries or small-scale industries, such amount of paperwork and this amount of knowledge, it looks difficult. So that also, I believe, remains a constraint. Even though they may have an ICC, but would it be just for namesake or on the paper, or would it really be functional to that extent that it is beneficial? And mostly evidence. So in cases of sexual harassment, it's very difficult to establish evidences, because nobody is aware that I would land up into a case of sexual harassment at this juncture. Let me quickly record, let me quickly click a picture. So clear establishing of clear evidence is there's a very bleak possibility of this. So that also remains an area of void when it comes to dealing with cases of sexual harassment. And here the responsibility lies on the shoulder of ICC and the management to make the most fair decision. Now let's look at some important cases. So these cases are
highlight. We are overshooting time, so if you can just quickly sum up these cases and conclude.
Yeah, I think I would then skip the cases, and I am open to questions, because I agree with Yash, we have really overshot short time. So I think my presentation is over, and I'm open for questions from the distinguished participants.
It was really a very wonderful presentation. I just request you, though we are short of time, we can just ask ma'am to share the cases, because it can be very useful. That's the only request.
Okay, sure, sir. So Gunjan, if you can quickly summarize those two cases.
Yep, sure. Thank you so much for bearing with me. So these two cases are basically about what we have already discussed in the workshop. So one is constitution of ICC is mandatory. So we have a case law here where Mr. G versus ISG Novasoft Technologies Limited. So in this instant case, Mrs. Gayatri lodged a criminal complaint against two officers of the company for alleged offences under the Indian Penal Code and the Tamil Nadu Prohibition of Sexual Harassment of Women Act 1998. So this act existed even before the central legislation came into being. It for the parties for resolution of all their dispute through arbitration. One of the claims, so there were two complaints. So one of the claim was for non-constitution of committee to inquire into allegations of sexual harassment, which was rejected by the arbitrator. So arbitrator said that this case is null and void, and hence the complainant approached Madras High Court. So the High Court's opinion differed from the arbitrator's opinion, and the court modified the award which was given by the arbitrator, and it allowed compensation of that's a huge figure, 1,68,00,000. The court stated that forming committee has twofold benefits. So court mandated that the ICC committee has to be there, and it has twofold benefits: a place where women employees could seek redress. So go and seek redressal of the complaint, and complaint can be inquired into a specially designated committee which has the legal know-how, which is unbiased. So and as I told you that the court has upheld time and again that it would look into the award given by ICC only if there is something which is disproportionately weird or disproportionately abnormal. Otherwise, the award given by ICC would always be upheld. So this is one case. And the second is a qualification of the external member of ICC. So when we were talking about the constitution of ICC, we said there has to be an NGO member or member from an association which is working towards the cause of women, and the said member need to have technical know-how with respect to the POSH Act. So this case is precisely about that. So again, in this instant case, appellant inter alia contended that constitution of ICC was improper on the grounds that the external member was not associated with NGO. So some external member was onboarded, but that person did not belong to an NGO, and his qualifications were not informed. Whereas the external member was a labor lawyer, however, with no expertise in sexual harassment matters. So what they did was they did not go for any association who was working for cause of women or for an NGO. They just went ahead and they hired a lawyer, and not that every lawyer would be an expert in cases of sexual harassment. So this was the complaint by Ruchika Singh Chhabra. So let's see what did the High Court say. The Delhi High Court reiterated that primary objective of having an external member in ICC is that external member would be in a position to command in front of influential management and is independent and impartial. The law requires the external member from an NGO associated, committed to the cause of women, person familiar with issues related to sexual harassment, and in this instant case, the person was not familiar with issues relating to sexual harassment, and therefore the ICC constitution was held as invalid, and reconstitution of ICC committee was ordered by the Delhi High Court. So these were the two cases. Thank you for bearing with me, giving me the opportunity to complete.
Sure, Gunjan. So
the cases as well, and I am over to you all now.
Sure. There is one question, Gunjan, by Dr. Sameer Pingle.
Sure.
He's asking, what are the types of cases reported in service and manufacturing organization? Is there any trend that is generally observed?
Okay, so Dr. Sameer, right? So Dr. Sameer, if we look at a general trend of cases at this point in time, while I was going through the case laws, see, there are a lot of cases which are there about the constitution of ICC itself. So as I also spoke about, there are a lot of loopholes in the law. So there are a lot of cases in the court around that. But if you ask about any specific trend in terms of cases that are filed with ICC, I don't think I would be in a position to draw any line as such, because right, it is all in the mind of a person who is doing something that can tantamount to sexual harassment, and therefore it's very difficult to draw a graph in terms of what are the possible cases that could be.
Sure. Thank you so much, Gunjan. I hope the question was answered, Sameer sir.
Yeah, yes, if we have time, I can ask one question. Sure. Is it possible? Ma'am, you said it is also applicable in unorganized sector. So how it will be, who will be the ICC members and how it will be applicable?
Absolutely. So thank you for this question, Sameer sir. So when I say unorganized sector, it is also applicable to the housemaids who come and work in our households. It is applicable to educational institutions as well. So now when I say unorganized sector, how it would be applicable there is that we also have something called as the She Box, She-Box is nothing but it is an electronic platform which is called Sexual Harassment E-Platform, where the women employee herself can go and lodge a complaint, or she can lodge a complaint through somebody who is more educated and in a position to use the E-Platform. That is one avenue. And the second is LCC, Local Complaints Committee. So again, see, know-how is very important here, Sameer sir. So you would say that usko kaise pata hoga. So I completely agree to this point that there has to be, government has to work a lot in terms of creating know-how amongst women employees. But at this point in time, they also have the avenue to go to LCC. LCC is taken care of by the district officer, the IAS officer. So it is run under his governance. So the women from unorganized sector can go there and file a complaint, and the complaint will be looked after the LCC committee. It is also a designated committee like how ICC is there, and they would look into the complaint, and the same procedure that is recommended for ICC would be followed. But sir, as you also would be thinking, I also believe that there is a huge thing. The maids who come to our houses would even be aware that there is a platform like this. So the know-how, I believe, is definitely a problem. But on paper and also practically, to a larger extent, the government has designed a process, and the government has designed forums where this such complaints can be addressed.
So Gunjan, that question was from Yogesh sir. So thank you, Yogesh sir, for that question.
No, not an issue. Ma'am,
I'm sorry.
Ma'am, if it's a construction site and suppose there is a construction work going on and there is some sexual harassment by a worker, so even in that case, she has to approach the local committee there, district office.
Yes. In case of building and other construction work, in case of registration under that, the aggrieved women employee has to reach out to LCC.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
So I don't see any further questions, but there are remarks for this session, Gunjan here. So Manishi says, thanks Gunjan for a very informative session. Look forward to doing more sessions with you. Dr. Pawan Chugan says, thanks Ms. Gunjanji for the excellent presentation. You have given us very important and valuable information on this subject. And that's about it. So Gunjan, this was a very informative session, as all the participants have been mentioning. And there were a lot of key takeaways that we could take from this session. So on this note, I would request Yogesh sir to kindly propose the vote of thanks, and we can conclude the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Yash. First of all, Gunjan ma'am, thank you very much for accepting our invitation and giving a wonderful session, and it was really very informative. Just for your information, ma'am, last year, 2019, ILO, International Labour Organization, has completed around 100 years. So in that, they have recommended that this sexual harassment for men also will be considered. So this was the update which I think we almost should know. All males should also know. So I think we have lost her, or what?
No, I am there, sir. There was a connection.
So, very, very excellent session, ma'am. Lot of takeaways, lot of doubts were cleared, and thank you very much, Gunjan ji. And hopefully, ISTD Ahmedabad, all members have learned a lot of things. We look for a long-term association, and thank you, Yash, for this wonderful session you have arranged. And once again, ma'am, on behalf of ISTD Ahmedabad, on behalf of all our committee members, on behalf of our chairperson Neelam ma'am, Secretary Manish ji, and our committee members, and even thanks Sameer sir for joining from Indore. So great to see you again and again on this platform. Thank you, sir. Over to you, Yash.
Thank you so much, sir, and thank you so much all the participants for being a part of this session. On this note, we would like to conclude this session. Thank you so much, and have a great weekend ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yash. Thank you so much, Yogesh sir, for your very kind and encouraging words. I also look forward to, being a part of ISTD once again, being a speaker for one of the sessions. I hope I see you all soon once again. Happy evening to all of you.
Okay, thank you so much.